At 6, the chairman of Yorkshire County Cricket resigns as the club is engulfed by a racism row. He's left over the club's response to the racism experienced by former player Azim Rafiq. Despite a year-long inquiry, no disciplinary action was taken.
What I've seen is a culture that's locked in the past, a culture that finds it difficult to accept challenge and change.
Former England captain Michael Vaughan was accused of making a racist comment to players, something he denies. The BBC says he won't be presenting his cricket programme next week. Also on the programme tonight, Greta Thunberg leads thousands of young activists through the streets of Glasgow to demand action on climate change at COP26.
They have had 26 COPs. They have had decades of blah, blah, blah. And where has that led us?
We report from a village in northern Alaska where rising sea levels are already driving people from their homes. New coronavirus cases begin to flatten out, with some experts saying the UK may have reached a peak. And Abba is back with their first album in 40 years.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, a blow for England as Captain Owen Farrell tests positive for coronavirus on the eve of their autumn international opener.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The chairman of Yorkshire County Cricket Club has resigned over its response to the racism experienced by the former player Azim Rafiq. Roger Hutton issued a stinging attack on executive board members who he said had shown a constant unwillingness to accept there was a problem after an investigation found Rafiq was the victim of racial harassment and bullying. Tonight, the BBC has announced that former England captain Michael Vaughan, who has strongly denied making a racist comment to a group of Asian players, won't be presenting his cricket programme on Radio 5 Live next week. Here's our sports editor, Dan Roan.
The racism that cricketer Azim Rafiq suffered at Yorkshire has plunged the county into an unprecedented crisis. Today, as the fallout continued, the chairman bowed to intense pressure to step down. And just hours after announcing his departure, Roger Hutton told me the club had let their former player down.
I'm sorry that he didn't have his allegations investigated in 2018. I'm sorry that it's taken so long. I'm sorry that ultimately the club hasn't shown the right contrition. I've not personally met anyone that I would consider racist at the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. What I've seen is a culture that's locked in the past.
Amid more resignations at Headingley today, Hutton blamed senior management, who he said resisted change after a report found Rafiq had suffered racial harassment.
There was a failure by many within the club to accept its findings or understand them or recognise them. And since then that has been incredibly frustrating.
The ECB has banned Headingley from hosting England matches, but Hutton said the governing body should have done more to support the investigation.
I heard a statement last night from the ECB that they repeatedly offered to help me and Yorkshire County Cricket Club through this investigation. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yorkshire batsman Gary Ballance had admitted repeatedly using a racial slur towards Rafiq about his Pakistani heritage, but a panel regarded it as friendly banter, and no action's been taken against any member of staff, sparking outrage.
Do you accept that conclusion that they reached,
well,
that it was friendly banter? Is that how you would deem that expression, that phrase, towards a colleague?
If you're using that language, it is completely unacceptable. But
so why was there no action taken?
Because you haven't seen the context of the whole of the report, and the club had legal advice that actually that was not something that you could take disciplinary action in relation to.
Is Ballance the only current member of staff that there's been an allegation upheld against?
No.
Former England captain Michael Vaughan, meanwhile, has become the second player to reveal he's named in the report. Rafiq alleging he'd made a racist comment towards a group of Asian players in 2009. Vaughan denies the claim, but today one of those players said he'd heard the alleged comment. A prominent pundit, tonight he was stood down from his radio show next week. In a statement, a BBC spokesman said it takes any allegations of racism extremely seriously. The allegation against Michael Vaughan predates his time working for the BBC. We've made the editorial decision that Michael won't appear as a presenter on 5 Live's Tuffers and Vaughan show on Monday. The show focuses on topical discussion around current cricketing matters, and given his personal involvement, we need to ensure we maintain the impartiality of the programme. This all comes at a time when cricket is desperate to try to engage with the South Asian community and become more diverse, and some fear this damaging episode may send the game backwards.
It's more about trying to get systemic change in a club like Yorkshire, which change has proven to be very difficult, and the club, I think, has failed to evolve quick enough in the way that society is changing and our attitudes towards race and racism.
This has been a devastating week for the most successful club in county cricket, but the ramifications of this remarkable saga now extend well beyond Headingley.
And Dan joins us now. It certainly has been a dramatic week for Yorkshire.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, the way that things have unravelled here, Sophie, the nature of the implosion at Yorkshire is like nothing I can recall in sport. In the space of just a few days' time, this club has lost pretty much all of its sponsors, its right to host international matches, its chairman, half of the board. There's allegations against 2 of the biggest names to play here in recent years. Tonight there's another revelation around the head coach, Andrew Gale. He's being investigated by both Yorkshire and the ECB over an alleged anti-Semitic tweet in 2010. And the fear, I think, is that this case perhaps has exposed an ugly side to the game. And certainly when you look at professional football, this sport seems to suffer from much less diversity and underrepresentation of non-white players. A fear, perhaps, as a result of this, that it's exposed that this sport is in some way out of kilter with trends in wider society. Today, Yorkshire issued a statement pledging that they would do whatever it took to regain trust. But the new leaders who come into this club will surely face one of the greatest challenges that sport has seen in recent years.
Dan Rowan, thank you. The mother of a 15-year-old schoolboy who was shot and stabbed outside his home in Birmingham has said her heart is broken beyond repair after 5 teenagers were convicted of killing him. Keon Lincoln died in January. Our correspondent Phil Mackey was in court.
Keon Lincoln, a 15-year-old schoolboy seen here messing around with his friends. In January, he was killed in broad daylight outside his house by a group of teenagers who were out looking for someone to attack in this stolen white car. Keon was chased, stabbed and shot dead. The gunman was just 14 years old. It was a horrific attack in a quiet suburban street. Police say it's not clear if he was targeted. It may have been a random attack. The stolen car was abandoned 2 miles away. In it, they found a knife and a mask with DNA. And there was more CCTV footage and phone records which led to the arrest and now conviction of 5 people. None of them showed any remorse. Michael Ugachukwu and Tajim Breckenridge are both 18. The 14-year-old and his 16-year-old friend can't be named because of their ages. The 5th defendant, Kieran Donaldson, who supplied the knives but wasn't part of the attack, was guilty of manslaughter. They'll all be sentenced later this month. The whole attack lasted less than 40 seconds, and among the first people who were outside to see what had happened were his mother and his twin sister.
I heard the gunshots, and my first instinct was, where's my son? Those are the first words I said, where's my son? I found out that there was somebody up the road, and yeah, it was my boy.
Since 2014, Birmingham's seen a surge in the number of under-16s sentenced for knife crime.
On return to Birmingham, police colleagues carried out a search. Live gun cartridges were found.
In response, the city's set up a special team to share intelligence about teenagers who are at risk of becoming involved.
Children are killing children. We're seeing it daily. Our community is in crisis. It feels like every other day there's a firearm, a gunshot, a knife wound, children being stabbed in parks. Places that are supposed to be safe spaces for children are no longer safe anymore.
Her son's become another teenage casualty in a city that's lost too many young lives in recent years. For Phil Mackey, BBC News, Birmingham.
The Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg has accused world leaders of deliberately postponing much-needed drastic action against global warming and said they were fighting instead to keep the status quo. Addressing thousands of young people at a rally in Glasgow, she called the COP26 climate summit little more than a celebration of business as usual. Here's our Scotland editor, Sarah Smith.
A rare opportunity for protesters to loudly deliver a message almost within earshot of the global decision makers gathered in Glasgow. Greta Thunberg, who inspired the Fridays for Future movement, says those leaders have so far failed to deliver. Young kids inspired by Greta have drawn their own pictures of her.
I know that she put out a sign and then everybody else started following her.
That's right. How do you talk to children this age about climate change without scaring them too much?
I don't have to tell them. They themselves are aware. They know about plastic, about pollution, about air pollution.
Climate justice! As the government announced measures to put climate at the heart of education, kids, mostly with their parents' permission, were skipping school to take part in this youth protest.
Your sign says now means now, not later. Why did you write that?
I wrote that because they're saying we need to do this now, we need to get this now, we're going to sort this now, but they're not sorting it. They're just going to make promises that they can't keep.
Do you think that's what the world leaders at COP are doing, making promises that you don't think they're going to keep?
Yes, this has happened a lot of times before. People say they're going to do things and they don't make enough change to actually have an impact.
Really hoping that the folk in COP sitting there drinking their tea are listening, and they're listening to what we have to say and trying to make a change.
Do you not think they're trying to achieve the same thing as you, to lower carbon emissions and try and save the planet?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they are trying, but we're trying harder.
So far at this COP, there have already been commitments to reverse deforestation, cut methane emissions, and promise more money than ever before to tackle climate change.
Greta Thunberg, who's at the front, doesn't seem very impressed with the progress of COP so far. What do you think?
I think it's fair enough. You know, it's COP26. I'm 26 years old. It's been 26 years. No progress has been made. You know, our carbon emission keeps increasing. We need action.
On stage, Ms. Thunberg dismissed COP26 as a PR exercise.
This is no longer a climate conference. This is now a Global North Greenwash Festival. A 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah. They cannot ignore the scientific consensus, and above all, they cannot ignore us, the people, including their own children.
Tomorrow, even larger crowds are expected, hoping to keep up the pressure before the final week of climate negotiations. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Glasgow.
Well, the impact of climate change is already very real for villagers on an island in northern Alaska. They're being forced out of their homes because of rising sea levels. Alaska is home to rapidly retreating glaciers, where the rate of melting is among the fastest on the planet. From there, here's our climate editor, Justin Rolat.
The top of our world is changing, warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet, and it is destroying communities.
Yeah, my house, it used to be about 20 feet out where you see the water breaks.
The island of Shishmaref is on the front line of climate change. As temperatures rise, less sea ice forms, exposing the coast.
It's getting later and later every year for this ocean to freeze up. It's tough, but gotta keep going.
As the climate changes, the animals and fish the people here used to live on are getting harder to find.
Right now we're supposed to be fishing in the lagoon and up the rivers. Now we've got to wait till like December, probably January to start going up again.
Parts of the main road have washed away, and now the airstrip that is the community's lifeline to the outside world is threatened.
If it gets to the runway, then we can't use it anymore. We use the runway for medevacs, we use the runway for getting all our food flown in.
The plan is to move the entire town onto the mainland. It'll cost an estimated $180 million, but, says Dennis, they've got no choice.
The climate's changing so fast, and the storms are getting more violent, and the ice isn't forming, and the water is warming. I mean, I would say within the next 5-10 years, this will all be covered. Easy. Just that 1 or 2 degrees makes a big difference.
And Alaska isn't just struggling to cope with its new climate reality on the coast.
A century ago, the glacier came all the way down here. The entire valley was frozen. And as recently as the 80s, they built this visitor centre because you could still see the glacier in the valley. Since then, it has completely retreated round the corner and you can't see it at all.
We're almost around the corner, we should be able to see the glacier.
These days, if you want to see the ice, it is now a tough hike up and over a high pass. This is all that remains of the once mighty Portage Glacier. And mountain glaciers aren't just melting here in Alaska, they are melting all over the world, potentially affecting millions of people who depend on ice for their water supply.
If we didn't have glaciers, we're no longer going to have drinking water for cities. We might not have any hydropower potential, especially for agricultural needs. We would have water only maybe during the winter months and not during the summer months. During the dry periods, there would be no water.
Back in Shishmaref, Alfred is struggling to come to terms with the idea that his home will soon be gone.
Well, Shishmaref means a lot to me because it's got a lot of heritage, a lot of good people. While we're here, we just got to keep our tradition going. Just try to keep going strong.
It isn't easy to let go of the place where you've spent your entire life, but if greenhouse gas emissions aren't cut rapidly, it is something many millions more people are likely to have to face.
Alaska is kind of like the canary in the mine when it comes to climate change. Because temperatures are so close to freezing here, raise them just a little bit and you get big changes. So ice that used to stay frozen or snow that used to hang around till the late spring or the summer is now melting or melting earlier. And that is driving sea level rise, and it is also squeezing the range for Arctic animals like foxes, bears and caribou. But here's the really big picture, Sophie. The fear is that rising temperatures could be kicking the Earth out of the cycle of ice ages we've been in for the last couple of million years and pushing us into a new and uncertain climate reality.
Justin Rodat in Alaska, thank you. The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. The chairman of Yorkshire County Cricket Club resigns over the club's response to the racism experienced by former player Azim Rafiq. And coming up...
You're not the man you should have been.
Abba, they're back in the studio with their first album in 40 years.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel. A tough day for Scotland as India eased to an 8-wicket win at the T20 World Cup.
The number of coronavirus infections could be flattening out, with experts saying we may have reached another peak. The latest figures suggest 1 in 55 people in the UK tested positive for COVID last week. That's more than 1.2 million people. It comes as the drug company Pfizer said it's developed a new COVID pill to be taken at the first sign of symptoms that is 89% effective at preventing hospital treatment or death. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
Are we going to go in the left or the right arm, sir?
As people come forward for booster jabs here in Marlow in Buckinghamshire and here at St Helens Rugby League ground, the hope is that the spread of the virus can be slowed down. There are very tentative views among expert modellers that there may be a downward trend for infections.
It's very possible that cases may continue to go down over the next few weeks, but I'm also very aware that we saw this in September and then we did see a climb in cases again. So I'm probably not confident enough yet to say that this is definitively what we're going to see. But if we continue to see this over the next couple of weeks, then I would be increasingly confident that this wave is turning over.
It's hard to read the data. The daily reported case numbers which cover people who've come forward for testing have been falling week on week. But an infection survey by the Office for National Statistics is based on household testing and includes those who don't have symptoms. It paints a broader picture. The latest ONS survey suggests that last week nearly 1.27 million people in the UK had the virus, about the same as the previous week. And the trend does appear to be flattening after increases recently. In England, 1 in 50 people had the virus. In Wales, it was 1 in 40, and Scotland, 1 in 80. Northern Ireland, with 1 in 65, was the only one to show an increase. But school half-term in some parts of the UK last week may have complicated the situation.
Half-term can have had a positive impact in that it may have paused some of those classroom transmissions that we were seeing happening very frequently through September and October. Of course, what we don't know yet if that will be a long-lasting effect or that now the kids are back at school, we'll start to see those infections pick up again.
While vaccinations continue, there's more optimism about COVID treatments. A pill developed by Pfizer greatly reduced the risk of getting seriously ill among the most vulnerable in trials. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, the government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show there were nearly 34,029 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That's 9,400 fewer cases than last Friday. It means an average of 37,975 cases were reported per day in the past week. Just over 9,000 people were in hospital with COVID yesterday. There were 193 deaths, that's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test, which takes the average number of deaths over the past 7 days to 171. The total number of people who've died with COVID now stands at 141,588. On vaccinations, 87.2% of people aged 12 and over have now received a first dose and 79.6% have been double jabbed. More than 9.3 million people have received their booster jab. That does include third doses for those with certain health conditions. The trial of 3 men accused of murdering a black man while he was out jogging has begun today in the US state of Georgia. The death of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery in February last year sparked protests across the US. There's been more controversy after a nearly all-white jury was selected for the trial in which the defendants have pleaded not guilty. Our North America correspondent Aleem Maqbool is in Georgia for us now. Aleem.
Yes, Sophie, well, it was called a modern-day lynching, and it hit the headlines not just because this was 3 white men who decided that this young black man looked like, they claimed, a burglary suspect, and that they felt gave them the right to arm themselves, chase him, corner him, shoot him and kill him. It wasn't just that it later emerged that one of them used a racial slur as Ahmaud Arbery lay dying, but it was also the fact that the police didn't make an arrest in this case for more than 10 weeks, and only then, once a video of the killing went viral and there were national protests. Well, I met the mother of Ahmaud Arbery before the trial started. She said she had never seen that video. Well, one of the most emotional, upsetting moments of the trial today was hearing her anguished cry as she watched that video for the first time in the courtroom. But as you said in your introduction, this trial starts in controversial circumstances because even though we are in a city that is majority black, in a county that is more than a quarter black, only 1 member of the jury is African American, and some of those supporters of the Arbery family who feel these racist attitudes contributed to the killing of Ahmaud Arbery also feel they may have a bearing on the verdict.
Aleem Maqbool, thank you. Around 1 million more children in England should be eligible for free school meals and would benefit from a hot meal a day. That's according to a leading food charity. The Food Foundation says there's an urgent need to expand the criteria of who qualifies by raising the earnings threshold to £20,000 a year before benefits. Our education correspondent Elaine Dunkley reports.
You feel like you're a failure, you're not a failure. Because I run a garden company, so my business has lost nearly 150 customers through COVID. I've lost about £18,000 this year.
Steve worries about putting food on the table for his 3 children. He also worries about feeding dozens of families across Staley Bridge. He set up this food bank to help others.
These are people who've worked and they've been on furlough, you know, gas going up, food going up, everything's going up and the wages aren't going up. There's more working families come here than there is people not working. And that's what I thought I'd never see. I need to get more food. I've not got the food to sustain this. Now we've got 2 tins of potatoes. I need 80 tins of potatoes this week. So, yeah, I do worry.
Have you had a good day? I literally live week by week, you know, and I might have £1 left in my purse at the end of the week. You need it on its cold, sweetheart.
Colette is a mum of 2 and works full-time. She doesn't qualify for free school meals because she earns above the eligibility threshold of £7,400 a year.
Going to a food bank, it's not nice. It's scary. Food's going up and it's all right when it's just like 20, 30p at that time, but when you work it out over the week or the month, it turns into pounds. I'll go to the corner shop. My youngest, he has like a little pot with his coins and he'll say, "Wait, Mummy, I'm just getting some money." And he'll bring it down. "I'll get this, Mummy, because you haven't got much money and you work hard, I'll get it out of my money." And it's so upsetting.
Another day and Steve has more deliveries.
It's going to Buxtonville. I've got a food bank in there with Debbie, the head teacher.
He's also set up food banks in 4 primaries, which mainly help the families who don't get free school meals but are running low on food.
There's lots of families who don't have much, so we really want to help them.
This head teacher wants the eligibility threshold expanded to include more children and says schools are struggling to provide a safety net to help working families.
So in an evening, usually at around 8 o'clock, myself and several other local head teachers go to collect the food for the children. Teachers are spending their own money on food, they're topping up the food banks. The challenges are significant.
The government says it's expanded access to free school meals more than any other government in recent decades. And there are currently over 1.7 million pupils in England that receive a nutritious free school meal through the benefits-related criteria. But food charities are warning it doesn't go far enough to reach working families struggling to put food on the table. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News in Stalybridge.
And finally, Abba have released their first album almost 40 years after they split up. It's called Voyage, and next year there'll be a concert in London, though they won't appear in person. Instead, there'll be digital versions of the stars on stage. The real singers have been speaking to our entertainment correspondent, Colin Patterson, at the studio where they recorded their comeback in Stockholm.
Benny and Bjorn in Abba's hometown.
Good thing about living in Stockholm is that people don't bother you. Not in the 70s, not in the 80s, not now. They come up now and they're all happy and say, "Wow, yeah. I'm so happy that you made a couple of new songs."
The idea of making a whole album was not part of the original plan. Abba had only gone back into the studio to record a couple of new tracks for next year's live show, which will feature digital recreations of the band in concert, looking like they did in 1979.
We had 2 songs. We enjoyed those. We thought they were really good, so we said, maybe we should do a couple of more.
This is a big deal, 40 years between albums.
Yes, it's emotionally very difficult to grasp, actually, that we did what we did.
We don't need to prove anything here. I don't think we're taking a risk, because if people think that we were better 40 years ago, fine.
You're not the man you should have been.
The album includes a number of songs about relationships ending. Both couples in the band divorced shortly before the group split in 1982.
People have read a lot of it into various lyrics. And of course there is some of that in the lyrics, but most is fiction.
But the emotions are there.
Yeah.
One reason Agneta and Frida were happy to rejoin Abba was an agreement that they didn't have to do any of the interviews. But even still, this reunion is set to be very short-lived.
I've said that's it. You know, I don't want to do another Abba album. But I mean, I'm not alone in this. There are 4 of us.
I think you can twist his arm, Bjorn.
The ladies might be able to do that.
Yeah. It'll take them to do it, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Colin Patterson, BBC News, Stockholm.
Time now for a look at the weather with Ben Rich. Hello.
Hi there, Sophie. Thank you. Good evening. Forget bonfire night fireworks displays. Nature has been putting on its own light show for some of us this evening. Some beautiful sunsets, particularly from some of our weather watchers in Cornwall, with the sun's light reflecting off all the layers of clouds that have been working in from the west. You can see that cloud here on the satellite picture. That cloud continues to feed in from the west overnight, so most places will be cloudy. There'll be some spots of rain and actually some heavier rain developing across northern and western parts of Scotland, where it will turn quite windy. But with the cloud, with westerly winds, it will be turning increasingly mild through the night. Many of us starting Saturday morning up in double digits, 10 or 11 degrees. But a lot of cloud to start the day and some rain moving southwards across Scotland into Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England and North Wales as the day wears on. Ahead of that, a lot of dry weather, but quite a lot of cloud. Behind our rain band, things will brighten up, but we'll see some further showery rain into northwest Scotland, where it will continue to turn increasingly windy, but mild, 11 to 14 degrees. Now, during Saturday night, our band of cloud and patchy rain will push across the south. More showery rain into the northwest of the UK, where the winds will continue to strengthen. And for a time in northern Scotland, we could see gusts of 60, 70 miles per hour, maybe even a touch stronger than that briefly, as an area of low pressure passes to the north of the UK. Lots of white lines, lots of isobars on the chart. It will be a blustery start to Sunday, and those winds will only slowly ease as the day wears on. But although we will see some showers in the north, many places on Sunday should be brighter, a much better chance of seeing some sunshine. And while it will feel perhaps a little cooler, those temperatures still in double digits, 10 to 13 degrees. So a somewhat milder weekend on the way. Sophie.
Ben, thank you. And that's all from the BBC News at 6. Now we can join the BBC News teams where you are. Goodbye.